So we have a very interesting presentation lined up for today, and a very eminent speaker. He is ready. Before I introduce him, I welcome all of you, all the participants, IET members and non-members. We have very eminent members, participants in the audience, Professor KKYW Pereira. I thank Professor Pereira for introducing and proposing Professor Vijaypala's name for this webinar. And my good friend, Dr. Kamal Lakshiri, I can see the President-elect of IESL for 2022 session. Hello, Kamal. And we have I can see many senior members who have joined with us. So let me, before introducing Professor Anura Vijaypala, I also did some research on this topic. So the first thing which comes to one's mind about nuclear power is risk. So we all have heard about the Chernobyl disaster, which happened in 1986. It was at the number 4 reactor in the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine. After that accident, officials closed off the area within 30 kilometers of the plant, except for persons with official business at the plant and those people evaluating and dealing with the consequences of the accident and operating the undamaged reactors. So you can imagine the danger, and the Soviet government evacuated about 115,000 people from the most heavily contaminated areas in 1986, and another 220,000 people in subsequent years. So, the Chernobyl accident's severe radiation effects killed 28 of the site's 600 workers in the first 4 months after the event. Another 106 workers received high enough doses to cause acute radiation sickness. 2 workers died within hours of the reactor explosion from non-radiological causes. Another 200,000 cleanup workers in 86 and 87 received doses of between 1 and 100 REM. That is the measurement unit of radiation. And then Chernobyl cleanup activities eventually required about 600,000 workers, although only a small fraction of these workers were exposed to elevated levels of radiation. And government agencies continue to monitor cleanup and recovery workers' health. So this was, I think, the biggest accident, nuclear power accident in the history. And then there was another one at the Fukushima nuclear power plant in Japan. The gigantic wave surged over defenses and flooded the reactors in 2011, sparking a major disaster. This was as a result of the 9.0 magnitude earthquake. So this nuclear power accident happened after earthquake. Authorities set up an exclusion zone which grew larger and larger as radiation leaked from the plant, forcing more than 150,000 people to evacuate from this area. A decade later, the zone remains in place and many residents have not returned, even now. Authorities believe it will take up to 40 years to finish the work, which has already cost Japan trillions of yen. The earthquake was so forceful, it shifted the Earth off its axis. It triggered the tsunami, which swept over the main island of Honshu, killing more than 18,000 people and wiping entire towns off the map. So this was Fukushima accident. Worldwide, many nuclear accidents and serious accidents have occurred before and since the Chernobyl disaster in 86. There were many others, right? And 2/3 of these mishaps occurred in the US, and the French Atomic Energy Commission has concluded that technical innovation cannot eliminate the risk of human errors in nuclear plant operation. The next question is whether nuclear power can be considered as renewable. The answer is yes. The energy that is produced by nuclear power plant is renewable, but the fuel that is required is not renewable. Although uranium is a very common metal found all over the world, nuclear fission requires uranium known as U235, U235, which is comparatively rare. So this is about nuclear. I'm not going to explain nuclear power because we have an expert here. Finally, let me quote one of my engineering friends from University of Peradeniya who commented by seeing our Facebook banner on this webinar. He said, "What is the value of this discussion when we don't have a plan to implement? Solar, wind will play a major role in power in the future." We had further communications on this with him, but I leave his comment also to Professor Anura to answer through his talk. If I go through Professor Anura's synopsis, it is very interesting. He has mentioned about the statement of the Government of Sri Lanka, I think this year or last year, that the Ceylon Electricity Board should plan its electricity generation based on achieving 70% on renewable energy by 2030. So he's saying it is so soon. He's asking. So the CB, his former working place, and many others are showing displeasure on not calculating the cost of this decision on the economy. So we can listen to Professor Anura on his views on this. Meanwhile, the impacts of climate change are felt everywhere, and they do not distinguish between the carbon polluters and non-polluters, right? We know who are the carbon polluters in the energy industry and who are the not polluters. So solar, wind, mini hydro, they are fine, but the intermittency, seasonality, and limited capacity are posing questions. When you compare nuclear power with those renewable energies, so nuclear power remains an unprecedented candidate for electricity generation without causing significant carbon emissions. So this is what he claims. And he's posing an interesting question to his former workplace colleagues, CEB. We also have many engineers from CEB in the IET membership, even IET main committee. And I listened to Engineer Rohan Senivran last year when he delivered the Vimala Suren Memorial Lecture at ISL. He presented the CEB's future energy generation plan. And he's asking, Professor Anura is asking, will CEB be relieved of its formidable dilemma on providing electricity at reasonable cost to its customers by nuclear-based electricity generation without subjecting people of the country to unwarranted risks in the horizon of next 30 years? So with that introduction, let me introduce our speaker tonight, Professor Anura Vijayapala. He's an electrical engineer graduated from University of Moratuwa in 1991. He served in the private sector electrical engineering industry for 15 years before joining as a senior lecturer at the Department of Electrical Engineering of University of Moratuwa in year 2006. So it's interesting, he has gone through the industry, the practical side of it before becoming an academic. He obtained his Master of Engineering degree in the year 2001. After completing his degree, after 10 years, he has obtained his master's from same university. He has been a chartered electrical engineer since 1996, and he is a fellow of the Institution of Engineers Sri Lanka and an international professional engineer. And I came to know before the webinar that he had been a chartered engineer of IET as well when IET was IEE. He has been chairman of Ceylon Electricity Board, Nerd Center, and LTL Holdings Private Limited. on sabbatical leave from the university. He has served as CEO of Windforce Private Limited. I think one of our past chairman, Manjula Perra, is the MD there. Even LTL Holdings, one of our past chairman, Dhammika Nanakara, is the current CEO. He has worked at Windforce from February 2018 to February 2020. He's a board member of the Smart Energy Council, Sri Lanka. Currently, he is serving as a professor in the Department of Electrical Engineering of University of Moratuwa. So this is a very brief CV of Professor Anura Vijayapala. He has many accolades and feathers in his hat if I go through his elaborated CV. So with that introduction and brief CV of Professor Anura Vijayapala, now it's time to start our webinar. Yeah, it's a good number. We have 36 now. The game rule is we will all switch off our videos and mics. Only Professor Anura Vijayapala will switch on his video and mic during the presentation. And please raise hand. Well, you put your questions in the chat box so that at the end of the presentation, I will take all your questions from the chat box. So that way we will save time and we will not disturb his presentation, but he will answer all your questions at the end of the presentation. So please switch off your mics and videos. And with that, let me hand over the session to Professor Anura Vijayapala. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ladithiyanage, for this introduction. So the president is the president IET Sri Lanka chapter, and other office bearers of IET, Professor KKYW Pereira and Professor Lucas, and I didn't see his name though, and I saw that Professor Prina Dias was there. All of them are my all-time teachers and members of IET. And ladies and gentlemen, once again, good evening to all of you. So I thank IET Sri Lanka chapter for inviting me to share my thoughts with the members of the IET, as well as other participants on the topic, pros and cons of nuclear power in Sri Lanka's journey towards carbon neutrality by 2050. At a time, Sri Lanka is facing hardest economic turmoil together with the COVID-19 pandemic. Sri Lanka's energy sector, especially the petroleum and electricity sectors, seems to be doing an uphill task in supplying uninterrupted services to their customers without price increases. Rupee has devalued against the dollar substantially, while the international market prices of oil, coal, and gas have rocketed up due to multiple reasons. At the same time, Government of Sri Lanka has announced its decision on 70% electricity generation by renewables by 2030 and net zero emissions by 2050, which the CB engineers argue too costly targets at a time the country is having many other priorities for short and medium-term economic recovery, as well as successfully facing the current fuel price crisis the entire world is engulfed in. This evening, the facts I am presenting are based on my involvement in the last 12 years on this subject. In 2009, we did a master's level study on the possibility of a nuclear power plant in Sri Lanka in the distant future. Later, I was a member representing University of Moratuwa in the committee appointed by the Honorable Minister of Power and Energy in 2011 to see the feasibility of nuclear power for Sri Lanka. Professor KKYW Pereira was the chairman of that committee. Subsequently, Professor Pereira and I made a publication based on our findings. In 2013, I had the opportunity of visiting a nuclear power plant in Korea, and also I had the chance of participating in an International Atomic Energy Authority's Integrated Nuclear Security Support Plans meeting in Vienna. And together with that, my teaching experience on the subjects energy and environment and project management all helps me in making this presentation this evening. But at the same same time, I must confess that I am not a nuclear scientist, or neither a nuclear engineer, nor a nuclear technologist. Therefore, in the presentation, I will not try to present any nuclear fundamentals as how nuclear fuels undergo fission reactions, etc. Rather, I will present facts based on the present-day energy supply situation world over and possible applicability of more nuclear in the long run. My speech this evening will be in 4 parts. First, I will discuss the present status of the energy sector, its increasing volatility, and why an enhanced nuclear scenario is going to be inevitable in the future world energy picture. Then I will focus on what has been happening in the nuclear industry and how it stands today compared to other sources, including the security aspects. Thirdly, I will discuss the procedures we may have to follow in case we decide to go for nuclear power and the timescales we are talking about based on the IAEA recommendations. Finally, let us look at a very interesting case study of a nuclear power plant currently being built in a neighboring country with similar conditions as ours. So despite all these risks, so the construction of nuclear reactors are going ahead. So with that, let me go to my prepared slides. I hope that all of you can see them. Dr. Lalit? Dr. Lalit, you can see my slides?
Yes, Professor. Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Okay, so this picture is from the nuclear facility I visited in South Korea. It's called the Kori nuclear facility in the southern part of Korea. So let us proceed to the first part of my speech. Now you can see during the last few months, something has gone wrong in the energy supply system in the world. You can see in the left side, I have a picture quoting World Bank's commodity market outlook, April this year, so a few months back, and where they predicted oil prices to remain stable under $70 a barrel for the next coming many years. Whereas already the prices have been climbing up and touching $90 per barrel mark. This is worst in LNG supply. So the LNG predicted price was below $10 per MMBTU or million BTU, whereas the present price is over $30 per MMBTU. You can see unprecedented increase in the LNG prices. And then coal is even worse. Coal expected to be below $80 a ton and now across the $200 mark. So the supply systems, the costs, now this economy of supply, all are in great trouble, and we don't know when this will end. And all these 3 graphs, they were in different units, traditional units, dollars per barrel for oil, dollars per MMBTU for LNG, and dollars per ton, metric ton for coal. So it is interesting to see them in one unit to compare their prices for the same energy content. So this graph shows the prices in dollars per MMBTU for all three. The topmost red one, the oil prices in MMBTU, US dollars per MMBTU, and then comes natural gas, and the bottommost you can see the brown dotted line. Yeah, I'm taking my cursor along that. It's even difficult to see it because of this yellow line. So you can see that is the coal price line for the same energy content, price in US dollars per MMBTU. So that is why there are, even today, 38% of world's electricity production is coal-based in 2020. So because coal is cheap, but there are other repercussions, so that we have to separately consider. But then when you consider LNG, the blue line is LNG, where liquefaction and regasification costs are involved. And then the other two are purple and yellow lines are really the natural gas prices where they're supplied by pipelines. So we can see the oil is the worst fuel to be used for power generation. So in the world energy supply, less than 3% electricity is produced by oil, burning oil. But in our case, almost 1/3 of our electricity comes from oil burning. So this is a very serious mistake our decision makers did in 1994. Without taking a considered decision to go for a LNG or a coal power plant in 1994, they took a decision to go for 800 megawatts of oil-based power plants, which has killed our economy of CEB and Sri Lanka. In my estimates, and even in other energy experts' estimates, during the last 25 years, we have paid about $6 billion on this decision. Therefore, so why I pointed out this here is, therefore, about this, whatever the decisions we take should be well considered, because they are going to be very expensive decisions. 70% renewables by 2030, no harm if we can do it, and if there are reasons to do it. And 2050 carbon neutrality, good, we should do it, but with a considered decision. Otherwise, like in 1994, we can make a drastic mistake and pay a huge penalty in the coming years, sacrificing our industry and government, because the electricity is heavily subsidized by the government for industries and the people and all that, but finally somebody has to pay the price. So with that, let us look at the nuclear side fuel as well, the uranium cost variation. So the left graph shows the historical prices about 2014 backward. It is in euro per kilogram. You can see it has also varied a lot. And the right side, there's the prediction. So it is predicting US dollars about 140 in the long run, uranium prices to be. But one difference between uranium and other fuels is, in nuclear electricity and other forms of electricity generation, thermal generation, is that the price sensitivity on fuel is very low. From the nuclear power plant generated electricity unit, less than 10% will be on fuel. All balance 90% will be on the power plant construction, capital cost, and the other operating costs. So here in this graph, you can see the left graph shows comparative prices, levelized cost in US dollars per megawatt hour for three technologies: natural gas, coal, and nuclear. So when modeling, we have to model it with different discount factors, because discounting will change the result. So they have indicated this in 3% discounting and 10% discounting in the project evaluation. And similarly for coal, similarly for nuclear. So we can see that, and in the axis, you can see it is in dollars per megawatt hour. So you can simply divide these numbers by 10, then it is cents per kilowatt hour. So this 100 means 10 cents per kilowatt hour, 12 cents per kilowatt hour, and so on. So we can see, if you look at 10% discount rate, natural gas prices can vary from about 7 US cents to 14 US cents, depending upon the sourcing cost, plant cost, operating costs, etc., etc. And similarly for coal, it can vary from about 8 US cents to about 12 US cents. And nuclear, it can change from about 5 US cents to about 14 US cents. You can see, so they all these are in comparable range. But only difference is that that nuclear, the dependency on fuel, unpredictability and the volatility of fuel prices is less impact, has a less impact. You can see in the levelized cost, nuclear, the capital cost has about 75% impact, whereas in coal about 63, natural gas about 22. And in the bottom graph here, the straight line graph, you can see the impact of uranium price on the levelized cost. So here it is something went wrong. Sorry, Dr. Ali, something went wrong, and so can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, we can
now
hear you.
we can see your slide now. Yeah.
Okay. Now this I think I pressed the wrong place in the button with the link. So you can see now this graph shows the fuel cost depending upon the uranium price. You can see even if uranium price is 120, this is in dollars per pound, even if it is 120, you can see the impact on the levelized cost is only 1 US cents. 1 US cents. And as we saw, this is very small compared to the total cost of total levelized cost. Therefore, one advantage of nuclear is this volatility, fuel price volatility, and the change is relatively low. So just moving on to the environmental side a little bit, because we are talking about the carbon neutrality in 2050 and total 70% electricity by 2030. Let me put a few slides on the environmental side as well. So these are beautiful pictures, the left side especially. So our planet taken from space, 12,700 kilometers in diameter approximately. And this picture has been taken by an Apollo mission when there was for the mission, Apollo mission, that there had been it has seen a solar eclipse. So it could see the atmosphere lighted up. The sun rays came through the atmosphere, and you can see the atmosphere and how thin it is. Although we believe that the atmosphere to be pretty big, but if you look at the global scale in the planet's dimension, this atmosphere is pretty thin, and into this thin atmosphere that we have been emitting enormous amount of carbon dioxide since the industrialization. So here it shows the emissions, gigatons carbon dioxide, that is billion tons of carbon dioxide. So in 2020, we have been emitting 35, despite the small drop due to COVID impact, we have been emitting 35 billion tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And so these are some scenarios that if you want to control where we should go along, let us discuss that later. But at present, it is like that we are emitting in the range of 35 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent greenhouse gases into this thin atmosphere, and resulting in permanent changes in the carbon dioxide concentration. Here we can see here pre-industrial carbon concentrations have been about 280 ppm. But during the last 200 years or so, carbon concentrations have gone up to 400. Now it is about 420 plus ppm. So substantial change, and based on which scientists are predicting all these environmental catastrophes, heat waves, and all these things. And let me come to this interesting slide by International Energy Agency. And you can see there are two lines, 220 lines and 230, this case scenario APS, announced pledges scenario. That is what have been announced by the governments at present about their reductions of carbon emissions by 2030. Just like we say 70% electricity from renewables by 2030, all the countries have given their pledges about this net zero emissions and all these things. And look at the 2020 line. So these values are per capita carbon emissions, that is tons per person per year. So North America in 2020 emitted a little over 10 tons of carbon dioxide per person per year, right? And see China a little over 8, and Europe about 5, and see India is only about say 1.8 or about that, and see Africa little development in many of the African countries. Therefore, they are in the range of 1 ton per person per year. 1 ton per person per year. Now the governments have given pledges that by 2030, like us, how they will reduce. So thereby North America committing, they will bring down their per capita emission to about 7 tons per person per year. And China, very little reduction. They are almost hovering about 8. And Europe, substantial reduction from say 5 to maybe 3 plus a level. And India, you can see interesting. India says, okay, we have too many poor people in our country, and therefore we must go for our economic development first. So by 2030, we can't reduce. We will have increased emissions. We have a right to emit. It's only 2 tons per person per year, whereas all the other developed countries are emitting more. Therefore, we will not take immediate actions, drastic actions to remove our cheap power plants from our fleets. And so it is interesting to see where we are, Sri Lanka is. So our emissions are in line with Africa, 1 ton per person per year. 1 ton per person per year. And therefore, whether we do all these things, our commitments, they are not very much affecting what should be done in the field by all these big emitters. So it is really what they should do. I think the government should take knowledgeable decisions. That I'm saying that these things should be known to the decision makers, and before they take hasty decisions in all these things. And similarly, we can see by 2050, a large number of countries have pledged they will go for carbon neutrality by 2050. That's good. But I didn't see Sri Lanka's name here, because maybe they have not taken us that serious, because we are only in line with Africa and a very small emitter. But here it is very interesting to note here, China has not agreed this 2050 target. It says we will go carbon neutral in 2060. And it is even surprising to see, I don't know whether you can read this very end, Australia and Singapore has said, we will go carbon neutral in the second half of this century, without giving an year. So they are keeping, that's why they are marked as black here, right? And so they are saying, we will go carbon neutral in second half of this century, but the year they are yet to confirm. Now let us come back to a comparative look at life cycle greenhouse gas emissions of different electricity generation technologies, including nuclear, and compare it. And here you can see, so this is in grams of carbon dioxide equivalent for kilowatt hour. For 1 unit of electricity, how many grams of kilowatt hour, how many grams of carbon dioxide is emitted. And we can see on the right side, we have the fossil fuels, coal. Medium value is, the middle value is about 1 kilogram or 1000 grams per kilowatt hour, pretty big amount, right? And in the worst cases, it can go even to near 1.7 in a very bad, inefficient power plants, right? Very inefficient power plants. And in efficient power plants, it can come down 700 level per kilowatt hour. And similarly for oil, and then say natural gas. These red dots indicate carbon capture and sequestration, which are yet to come in a large scale, only proposals. In that case, they can store carbon dioxide. In that case, they can reduce the equivalents. But let us look at how the renewables are doing. Here's the photovoltaic. No technology is carbon free, right? Even the electricity generated from photovoltaic has a carbon emission, because every panel we produce for the processing of silicon, for manufacturing of the panels, and then transportation, installation, all has a carbon footprint. Therefore, there is a carbon equivalent amount of carbon dioxide for every panel. So it has to be distributed among the electricity generated throughout its lifetime. So we can see that, so it also varies depending upon the efficiency and also the solar insulation where it is installed. If it is installed at the best solar insulation place, so it will be lower emissions somewhere here. But if it is at the worst place and produced with the worst efficiency, it can go near 200 grams per kilowatt hour. You can see, but best efficient and average panels can have maybe 40-50 grams per kilowatt hour carbon emission, life cycle carbon greenhouse gas emission. And it is interesting, I will not go through everything, but look at the nuclear energy, what they have given. Nuclear in operation, it doesn't emit anything, but it has a big carbon footprint for it is the process of manufacturing it or the installation and other work, and also the fuel extraction and recovery and enrichment, and all these things consume pretty big amount of energy, and therefore there's a carbon footprint. And the next slide will show the breakdown of carbon emissions in nuclear life cycle. You can see the fuel enrichment, fuel handling, and that part take about 25 grams, and the plant construction about 8, plant operation about 12, spent fuel conditioning and storage about 10, and then the decommissioning about 12. So altogether about 65 grams per kilowatt hour emissions from nuclear life cycle GHG emissions. Next, I come to the electricity produced by nuclear so far in the world picture. So on the right side, this circular graph shows that in 2020, total electricity produced in the world over is 26,000 terawatt hours. 26,000 terawatt hours. In Sri Lanka, we produce about 15 terawatt hours. 15 terawatt hours. So in this scale, you can see we are very small. And you can see here 38% coal and so on. See the oil world over. Oil-based electricity generation is below 3% due to the reasons I said, because oil is expensive for the same energy quantity. No one is doing it. Only the oil producing countries probably are doing it because they have their own oil. So we are doing a foolish thing by burning so much of oil for power generation. And here it shows the variation by region. You can see, so it has gone up and down. Maybe Fukushima accident in 2011 has put some brakes because Japan shut down most of their reactors temporarily, and then they opened up them later on. And so you can see in Africa, there's one plant I heard that is in South Africa, but otherwise they are not significant. But other countries and regions are producing a significant amount of electricity from renewable, and it amounts to about 10% at the moment. So the 10% of world electricity in 2020 came from nuclear power plants. And so there are 34 countries producing electricity with nuclear by 2020. There are 4 newcomers. UAE, being a Middle East country, UAE is constructing nuclear with Korean technology. Then the Belarus, Bangladesh, and Turkey. Bangladesh is the project. Bangladeshis are doing their first project. So I will take it as a case study because they have gone through this process recently. And let us see how they fit in, how they have done it successfully. And their reactor construction is on the schedule, it seems. So there are 449 reactors in operation and 55 under construction. And here are the technology-wise. I will not go, as I said earlier, into details of the various technologies. But the summary of the technologies, the famous technologies, more popular technologies, we can see here. This PWR, pressurized water reactors, are the most common. So out of 443 reactors, 304 are PWR reactors. So USA, France, Japan, Russia, China, South Korea, all are using this technology, using enriched uranium as the fuel and water as both coolant and moderator. And you can see out of 394 gigawatts, 289 or 290 gigawatts are from this technology, PWR reactors. Then BWR reactors, boiling water reactors, comes next, 62. And then this Canada's famous CANDU reactor. So it is both in Canada, India, as well as I heard that there's some in China as well, and 49. And other types are small. These small modular reactors, new technologies, they are still not very popular. They are only a limited number in the picture. So for the future, if we are going to control this global warming, so we have to switch to less polluting, less emitting technologies. So they are under different scenarios. I showed you earlier some curves with different scenarios. Let me just briefly say something about these names. This steps is stated policy scenario, depending upon the governments already declared their government policies. But after 2015, they have enhanced them by announced policies. So they have said, we will do more. And then what is required as per this net zero emission by 2050 requirement. So I will only refer to this picture here. And here you can see in 2020, world electricity generation is about 400 gigawatts came from nuclear. And they propose that if they are to go for net zero emissions by 2050, it has to double to 800 in the next 30 years. So you can see, therefore, everywhere, if this net zero emission, as we saw that many countries have pledged, so substantial support they are expecting from nuclear power plants world over. So they will have an enhanced program on this. And these are the reactors under construction already. You can see China is currently putting 18 reactors, India 7. So it's interesting. I will only refer to our South Asian neighbors. You can see India, 7 reactors are being built. Bangladesh, 2 reactors are being built of the size of 2,160 megawatts. 2,160 megawatts, Bangladesh. And then Pakistan is building 1 right now. And all of them will come to function within next 5 to 7 years. You can say Pakistan 1 by 2022 with connection, and Bangladeshis want to do their first unit in 2023 and the second unit in 2024, and they are on schedule. They are not lagging behind. And India by 2026, they will connect 5,000 megawatts capacity, 7 reactors. And I heard that there about 3 or 4 reactors are very close to us at Kundamkulam in the southern tip of India. And this is the Chinese nuclear program. Today, by 2020, they are producing about nearly 50, slightly less than 50 gigawatts of electricity from renewables, in nuclear. And then within next 15 years, they want to go just about 120 gigawatts. So you can see the amount of weight they put on nuclear because of their own reasons and the requirement to go for low emitting technologies in order to meet the 2050 or their China is coming in 2060 net zero emission targets. And let us just look at this slide. I'm sure that Professor Prinath will be in a better position to describe this diagram because of his extensive association with the International Atomic Energy Agency. But anyway, you can see this is the typical program that they are advising the member countries to look at in case they want to look at a nuclear power program. It is not just like today you meet the minister or anybody and then do a presentation to him, and tomorrow he says, okay, I will put a cabinet paper, and next day they say we are going for a say 500 megawatt nuclear power plant. That you can't do that way, especially for technology like nuclear. So you need a well-considered decision. So the IAEA is advising, first think about whether you at all want to go for nuclear. So, and include that in your national energy strategy, in our context, our national energy policy. And then work out another 3-4 years on this feasibility. right? Pre-project activities. Considerations before a decision to launch a nuclear power program is taken. So it is 3-5 years. That is how the other countries have done. Then you arrive at the milestone 1, ready to make a knowledgeable commitment to a nuclear power program. And then go for the project development phase, where you will have all these other actual work, like what we're going to see in the next slide. Then the milestone 2, after about another pre-project, the project development work, you are ready to invite bids, negotiate a contract for the first nuclear power plant, etc. And now this will be more clear when we look at the milestones of this Bangladeshi power plant, very clear. So let us look at that at the end part of it, then you will understand this better. And the phase 3 is really the implementation of the project, and then commissioning and operating the power plant, and then decommissioning at the end of its lifetime. And a lot of activities have to happen. That is why this nuclear thing is a bit complicated. So it is not just like doing a LNG power plant or a coal power plant. So you need legal framework, funding and financing, management, nuclear safety, radiation protection, regulatory framework, and you need to have a electrical grid connected to a large power plant to evacuate power, and then human resource development. In Sri Lanka, for example, if you look at now, we have very little knowledge on nuclear power, and then the site development, identification of the site, environmental protection, and there are many things to happen. So you can see, and we will see these things also in the case study, how Bangladesh power plant, they have managed to do all these things in a methodical way, although they are a poor country, maybe even lesser GDP per capita than us. So there are 3 key organizations that will be involved in this exercise. Definitely the government taking the leadership, and then a regulatory body like our Atomic Energy Regulatory Council, and then government will have to set up their own owner operator. It can be a government department, government company who will take the ownership and operate it. And then the question arises, what kind of a size of the power plant is suitable for Sri Lanka's grid? Now you can see, if you look at 15 to 20 years of development, you can see even if you take a decision today, it will take at least 15, most probably 20 years to realize the plant. So we have to look at how our grid will stand by that time, and then see what kind of capacities of power plants we can connect to the grid. But of course, in a nuclear power plant, after the reactor, the power plant need not to be the reactor size, because then it's a steam power plant after the recovery of heat from the nuclear part. So it will be going into the steam generation, the second circuit, and then it's a steam power plant. We can size the power plant as we want, but the larger units will have economies of scale, and so better prices. So I looked at this long-term generation expansion plan available, last plan 2020-2039, which predicts by 2040 we will have a peak load of about 7,000. You know that in deciding the larger units which can operate in the grid, it is not the peak that is important. I think most of the electrical engineers knows it. So it is this off-peak time that is playing a critical role. Because as per the stability simulations, stability studies, your largest unit in Sri Lankan system, your largest unit cannot be more than 25% of the demand at that time. So the demand is lowest during these early hours of the day. And for example, if you take this 2018 line, so it may be 1,250. And then 25% of that, just about 300 megawatt. So we can run our Norachole 300 megawatt unit without derating them. But look at the blue line here, 2014 line. So about 1,000 megawatts. So 25% is 250 megawatt. Therefore, we had to derate our 300 megawatt Norachole unit to 250 megawatts during this early morning low demand period. So that is, you are losing your economy. Your efficiency is going down. Therefore, but you can see this early morning demand is about 60% of the peak demand. 60% of the peak demand. So if we apply that, so here you can see it's about 7,000 megawatts peak load in 2040. So 60% comes to about roughly about 4,000 peak load during the off-peak demand. So 4,000 into 25% is about 1,000. So we can easily have even 1,000 megawatt unit. So so the size will not pose a question. So we can go for modular reactors, even lesser like CANDU and all these things. But even a standard large unit also will be suitable for Sri Lanka as far as the size is concerned. And there are small modular reactors, 300 megawatts, 750 megawatts. In India, there are 200 megawatts CANDU units as well. So we can consider, but the smaller the units, you are losing your economy. But of course, the upfront capital cost will be lower. The affordability is higher. So I think these things we have to consider, all these things before taking decisions. So now I come to the case study that I'm presenting. This Rupur nuclear power plant, Bangladesh. You know, Bangladesh had this nuclear idea, really Pakistan had this nuclear idea starting from 1960s, before Bangladesh was born. Then the Pakistan identified this Rupur site for their first nuclear power plant. Then Bangladesh separated. And then therefore the Pakistan had to put up their first power plant, I believe at Karachi. But Bangladesh could not do the power plant, although the site was in their land, until 2010. So they did various efforts, but the concrete thing they couldn't do. So let us see the chronology of the activities which has resulted in a power plant under construction now, and which is on schedule. So in 2010, they they signed a cooperation agreement with Russian Federation, with Russia. And then they took a decision, considered decision, a policy decision to do the Rupur nuclear power plant. And then in 2012, the Bangladesh Atomic Energy Regulatory Act 2012. And then 2013, they did a preliminary study agreement with Russia which is costing about $555 million with a credit facility of 500 million from Russia. And then after that, so they did this Prime Minister's first stone lane like here, some maybe just to get political something or whatever. So it has not resulted in starting the construction during that year. Then the Russian government identified their government arm, this Rosatom State Atomic Energy Corporation, to do this project. And so they nominated them as their agency to do the project. And 2015, the Bangladeshi Parliament passed this Nuclear Power Plant Act 2015 that established Nuclear Power Company of Bangladesh for operation and maintenance of country's nuclear power plants. So that is a separate legal body created under this act to do all these things, because a lot of things are involved, and so they should have the autonomy for doing that. And I have put certain clauses here under red. Let me take this here. Okay. This also. Okay, you can see on 2015 December, they signed a contract for 2 units of Rupur nuclear power plant with a total capacity of 2,400 megawatts at a cost of $12.65 billion. Under the contract, the Russian authorities will educate and train 1,950 individuals, mainly for operation and maintenance of the power plant. You can see the manpower building and the requirement of that. So they signed it in 2015, it started in 2015. And then 2022, they signed an agreement for the design and the site license. And 2016 July, right? See here, that's a very important clause. Authorities of Bangladesh and Russia signed an 11.38 billion credit agreement with the interest rate of LIBOR plus 1.75%, with 10-year grace period and 20-year repayment. So when you look at this, it seems very attractive for this kind of expenditure. And they are giving 90% of the project cost. Out of 12.65, they are giving 90% of the project cost as a credit facility. And 10-year grace period. So after constructing 6-7 years, they can operate it for about 3 years before starting the loan repayments. And see the interest rate, LIBOR plus 1.75. Most of the loans that we have taken from China for our infrastructure development are LIBOR plus 3%. Expensive interest rates. So that is why we are finding it difficult to pay them. So this is a very interesting and very attractive rate, but I know that the ADB kind of loans have even still lower interest rates. So in 2017, Bangladesh government signed an agreement with its Russian counterpart for sending back the nuclear spent fuel. So they have signed already. So all the spent fuel will be dispatched back to Russia. And so then the conditional licensing for design and construction. And 2017 November, officially they started the construction. Although the Prime Minister laid the first stone in 2013, maybe some political this thing, but you know that they really started the construction of the reactors and other things in 2017, end of 2017. And this is how the project is entirely planned and now under implementation. You can see, so they started in first unit in end 2017, construction 6 years, and then the commissioning, and 2023 first unit to be operational, commercial operation. And the second unit again taking six years, and the commissioning in 2024. So both will go on commercial operation by 2024. And they have 60-year lifetimes. 60-year lifetimes. So I'm sure the Bangladeshis will get a pretty steady power from these 2 units, because these nuclear plants operate with very high capacity factors, about 90% or 85-90%. And so their generation will be substantially large plant factors. So if you take, say, solar power plant, the plant factor might be about 17 to 20%. Wind power plants may be in the world range about 25 to 30%, and so on. So nuclear power plants can operate at a very high plant factor. And I found this very interesting paper published in 2020 by some academics analyzing the Bangladeshis power generation cost to compare with the nuclear power plant. So you can see these are the levelized cost of electricity. So they call it levelized unit electricity cost. We are used to say levelized cost of electricity, LCOE, but they are the same, coming in US cents per kilowatt hour. US cents per kilowatt hour. We can see oil-based power plants. These 4 are oil-based power plants. HFO, IPP, diesel IPP, and so on. You can see pretty expensive. That is what has happened to us, where we have gone wrong. And Bangladeshis have their own gas, therefore they are substantially low, depending upon their pricing formula. But you can see the coal, 10.3 US cents per kilowatt hour. And see the expected prices of Rupur power plant under high dispatch and low dispatch scenarios. And see 6.4 US cents and 4.3438 US cents. So you can see in the comparison scale, so they are pretty low cost electricity in the long run. They run for 60 years. So it is a relief on the economy for them. And this is how it compares in the global scale. The unit levelized cost in the electricity generated in different countries. So in some countries, they are a little high. Maybe their own reasons, their operational costs are high. Maybe sourcing of fuel is costly. But you can see average is below 10 US cents. 10 US cents. And in countries like South Korea, 5 US cents. And the China, about 6 US cents, 6.5 US cents, and so on. So you can see they are affordable electricity, but the other factors like risk and other things we have to consider. So these are some pictures that I looked at from this Bangladeshi site. You can see this is their plan, the planned plant. This is the one that's under construction. And you can see, so I heard that the first, nuclear reactor vessels, the high pressure vessels have arrived at site and they have been installed, and other civil work is also, and the electricity lines and substations are also getting completed, because now it's already 2021 and 2023. They want to get the first line on commercial operation. And let us look at their site here. So this is the Ruppur nuclear power plant. You can see the construction of various components we can see. And so this entire land. So this is to a scale of about 100 meters per centimeter light, 100 meters per centimeter light. And you can see it is in the heart of a city. It's in the heart of a city, maybe a 1 kilometer maximum distance, right? To this, you can see bazaars and hardwares and mosques and all that. And they are using this Padma River for cooling, right? So there will be a buffer zone, but we don't need, huge evacuated areas to, as per the present day technologies of nuclear. And I looked at the similar situation in Korea and also USA and other countries, and maximum distance to the nearest residences, about say 1.52 kilometers. Of course, there will be evacuation plans or emergency evacuation plans and all these things. But despite that, the people are living close to them. So there is no reason for having very large evacuated buffer zones for nuclear power plants in the present day, despite the what Dr. Lalit described at the beginning, the nuclear disasters. Of course, the nuclear disasters are alarming, but world is facing, we have to look at the reality. So the disasters are much more in others. For example, a heat wave comes and sweeps hundreds and thousands, hundreds of people, maybe in some countries, thousands of people due to a heat wave. And tsunami comes. Now Fukushima, Dr. Lalit said, there were a couple of deaths and all that, but the tsunami killed 18,000 people. Tsunami, that is not the nuclear accident. That is that the tsunami killed 18,000 people. And if you look at our neighbors, India, right? Already they have 23 reactors in operation, generating about 7 gigawatts, and 7 under construction, aiming at about 5 gigawatts to come. And see the locations. This Kundankulam power plant, which is very close to us, where new reactors are just being installed, they plan to go for 10 reactors. 10 reactors. So it's a big power plant. And then you can see already we have this and this very close to us. And all these yellow lines are new sites they have found for nuclear power. You can see they have some inland because maybe they are using the rivers for the cooling requirement. Then look at the Pakistan's program. Pakistan already have 5 reactors generating 2.2 gigawatts. And 1 reactor is under construction, as I said earlier. But you can see now these power plants are operated where their big terrorism is in operation. So you can see Bin Laden was found in Pakistan. So, and there are many crazy guys there. And you can see despite this, the government are able to protect these units from such attacks and to operate them. You can see that this containment building of a nuclear power plant, the thickness of concrete is about, say, 1 to 2 meters. The containment buildings, the concrete thickness. So they have pretty strong situations. So now, as Dr. Lalit started with our discussion, so let us look at the Fukushima, Chernobyl, and 3 Mile Island accidents, which are the 3 major accidents recorded in the history. So Fukushima was the latest, and let us just see the reason of the failure. So it is earthquake and tsunami, flooding of the backup generators, and cutting off the transmission lines from the power plant. And then this causing the failure of the reactor cooling system, and then the reactor meltdown, explosion damaging containment building, and the release of radiation. And you know that there have not been any immediate deaths. In 2018, government has admitted 1 death, and there are several hundred people who have been exposed to radiation. But of course, as Dr. Lalit said, large area is unoccupied because the people are afraid to come into even the slightest radiation exposed area. So there's a huge cost. I understand some $100 billion government had to invest on this operation to pay compensation and other things. And the worst nuclear accident, as Dr. Lalit said, is the Chernobyl accident. And see, that's a human error. So they have shut down the unit 4 for a routine test. And among other things, tests had been done without following the safety procedures properly. And then a sudden power surge, explosion and fire, release of radiation. And then, but all in all, it has caused up to 2004, 78 deaths. And UN predicted more 4,000 premature deaths because of the people who have been who have received doses of radiation. But we must also remember that there were reports. This minute radiation was felt even in Sweden, in Canada, in Europe, because the wind carried them. So you can see these things can be felt world over if a worse nuclear accident happens. So we must remember that as well. But the 3 Mile Island accident, 1978, again an operator mistakenly opening a safety valve and releasing radioactive coolant and partial meltdown, but the casualties have not been recorded because it has not radiated too much for the people to be damaged or killed. So you can see, other than this, there have been very low-level accidents or nuclear radiation leaks which have not caused in substantial radiation. But you can see that we are living in a world with 8 billion people, and 8 billion people need electricity. And so we will have to take some risks in all cases. So unfortunately, so without taking risk, you can't do. But I think modern science, with modern approach, we should be able to make almost these human errors, minimize human errors. But of course, this earthquake, tsunami, etc., of course, we will have to live with them, unfortunately. But to avoid constructing plants of this risk, high-risk plants in such areas. And so this is a picture of the Chernobyl accident, and you can see the size of the explosion and the fire and the smoke. And some pros and cons for the nuclear part. I am coming to the end part of my discussion. You can see some pros are they are relatively low life cycle GHG emissions, especially in view of this requirement for carbon neutral by 2050. And is an answer for increase in fossil fuel prices, just like what is happening today. A solution to ensure energy security in the context of the possible depletion of supplies of fossil fuels. The need to meet the rapidly growing energy demand in developing countries. So developing countries are electrifying. Now Sri Lanka is 100% electrified. And so are many African countries. So all of them have to be supplied with electricity. So if we can't do coal power plants, if we can't do gas power plants, if we can't do oil power plants, which all emit carbon dioxide, so we have to look for other options. And we need, when you have intermittent sources like, say, solar, wind, etc., we need some inertia into the networks, which can be provided by only rotating machinery, which should be powered by, say, power plants like nuclear, coal, or LNG, and oil. And if the fossil fuels are not the answer, this steady power, the inertia required by the networks can be provided at the moment by, say, biomass kind of power plants, or otherwise by nuclear kind of power plants. Some cons. So it is initial capital intensive. We can see that 2,000 megawatt Rupur power plant, Bangladesh, cost $12 billion. $12 billion. So initially it is, although the fuel cost is low, initial investment is high. Takes a long time. So if we take a decision today, it will be 15 to 20 years by the time we start the first unit's commercial operation. Although rare, potential nuclear accidents and nuclear waste handling, transportation, and the security, cyber security, all these things are to be considered. And the terrorism we can't leave behind. And I noted in one news item that in Belgium, they have faced a new situation because the terrorists have not infiltrated into the power plant, but they have brainwashed existing staff members. You know, this the terrorists, they have taken hold of some young people, and then they have brainwashed them, who could potentially damage these power plants. And later, when they were sacked, they have gone to Middle East to the IS camps and started fighting for IS. So they have been so brainwashed. So coming to the last slide of my presentation this evening, you can see, so all these nuclear power plants are operating on this basic scientific principle, E equals mc squared. E equals mc squared. And you can see 2000 years ago, Buddha preached about this entire universe comprising of Satara Mahadhatu, Patavi Dhatu, Apo Dhatu, Vayo Dhatu, and Tejo Dhatu. And then the science, until recently, said all matter is in three forms: solids, liquids, and gases. Then relatively recently, Albert Einstein came and filled this vacant position in the scientific definition for heat by connecting with the solids, liquids, or gases. You can convert them to the form of energy equals mc squared. So that what Buddha said, Tejo also is a dhatu comprising of the energy in the world, entire universe. So we have connected solids, liquids, and gases also into this form of energy, completing it. So ladies and gentlemen, with that remark, I come to the end of my presentation. Once again, I thank IET for inviting me to make this presentation. And I should thank all those who helped to conduct this. And also I would like to thank my colleague, Dr. V. Logishan, who helped me in preparation of this PowerPoint presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Andrew Jayapala. Very interesting presentation. We didn't talk about nuclear power for a long time. As I elaborated at the beginning, what my Peradeniya electrical graduate, my friend, told was the point of this discussion if we don't have plans. So there were a couple of questions in the chat box, but my first question comes to you. Now you mentioned about the committee which was working on nuclear power, which was chaired by Professor Pereira. You said Professor KKYW Pereira, he's also in the audience. What happened to your recommendations to the government? Why nuclear has not been considered in the CEB renewable energy plan? That's a very basic question, and maybe yes.
I think, Dr. Lalit, now this is a serious issue in our part of the world, in our countries, that we don't make, that policy decisions which are not dependent upon the party politics or the governing parties. For example, now India is doing their nuclear program. Whatever the government comes in, they go ahead with that. They are not changing it. They will not say stop that reactor construction or stop the nuclear program, etc. But we need, our governments, our oppositions, and our other professionals, institutions need to sit together and in important areas like this power generation and all these things, take policy decisions which will last for long periods. So what happened was 2013, after the minister was shifted to some other ministry, that entire program, as I remember, Professor KKW will remember, that that program was abandoned.
Yeah. So we have good examples from our neighbors, right? India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and as you correctly said, it might have been political and commercial interest which have kind of ignored this valuable energy source. But I am not sure whether for a small island like Sri Lanka, how it is feasible geographically. I'm not sure. You can maybe answer that because I'm not sure whether for a small island around the sea, how feasible a nuclear power plant. Maybe, it's not a value. worthy point to consider.
I think, Lalit, we should, no, I'm not canvassing for nuclear power. I don't say I will canvass for it, because I am not sufficiently knowledgeable to do that. But, we should invite, say, IAEA, their experts, and put our experts together and assess the risks and our suitability, location, and alternative options we have if we don't go for nuclear, and look all these things and make a considered decision whether this is suitable or not. Otherwise, we don't do anything. We don't do anything, and other neighboring countries all are doing it, and they are economically will be prosperous. Now we are already taken a financial facility from Bangladesh, $300 million. So finally, we will be the poorest country in this region if we don't take considered decisions.
Yeah, true. I want to hear from Professor KKYW Pereira, being a member of your committee, chair of that committee. What do you think about nuclear power? I mean, I know you are your passion is energy saving, and you have been working in the industry for a long time, introducing a lot of energy saving options. What do you think about, sir?
Thank you for asking my opinion. But really, what Andrew said is true. That is one part. There's another part, because towards the end of our study, the Fukushima disaster happened. And ministers and others won't let us even talk about nuclear power because they got so scared with Fukushima. In Japan, such an advanced country, could happen. What can happen in Sri Lanka? So therefore, the whole program was scrapped. Initially, we wanted to train and teach people about nuclear, and then go on the same basis as Andrew mentioned, about 5-year time before decision making, before commitment. But we couldn't proceed on that, and partly what Andrew said, and partly the Fukushima disaster occurred.
Okay. That's why, sir, at the outset, I brought all these accidents, the risk into consideration. And actually, Professor Vijaypala nicely answered to those queries. But that might have been one of the concerns by our government about the risk, and also high capital investment may have been another reason why we couldn't consider that. With that, let me take up these questions in the
chat
box.
Speak?
Yes, sir.
One more thing, that is, the government was very alarmed with Fukushima, and therefore, although of course I was competent in this field technically because I had my master's degree in nuclear power, but still with that we couldn't persuade them to go ahead with that, and mostly because of the Fukushima.
Okay. Yeah, it was bad time. Maybe it has occurred because 86 Chernobyl, it has already gone out of our minds, right? By that time, but
they won't even let us anyone speak about nuclear power after that, because it would have been so bad.
To add to this, 2013, I visited a nuclear power plant in Korea and had a discussion. But the Koreans were going ahead in full speed on their nuclear program in 2013. I'm meaning that is 2 years after the Fukushima accident. So they had not cared about anything about. They were sure of their technology and the safety procedures. And
Professor Anura, out of all the accidents happened in the world, I didn't hear anything from Korea. Is it?
No, not from Korea. Neither from France. France is having 70% of their electricity generation from nuclear. The domestic generation of electricity in France is 70% of nuclear, and not a single accident is recorded.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. Right.
Yes, can I add one more thing?
Yes, sir. Yes.
At that time, most countries halted nuclear programs temporarily, and even Japan stopped nuclear programs.